My name is Jim Norman, and I used to work in power generation. Presently, I am recovering from a work comp injury, and it's been a long haul. But right now, my future is unknown. I am a 55-year-old fellow that is looking at permanently changing his career. And it's not exactly what I planned to do, but it's what I'm going to do. I used to work for the largest power company in the world. I worked in solar power, and that covered 16 sites throughout southern Minnesota. And basically, I was a level 3 electrical technician. However, before I started working with this company, I worked 24 years in industrial maintenance. So this was my first power generation position. On June 13th, it was a Sunday afternoon. I was called out on an emergency call because half of a solar site had gone down. And so at that time, being that I had my work vehicle at home, I dispatched directly out to the site. And when I got out there, basically, they were correct. Half the site was down. Unfortunately, I did not have a lot of experience underneath my belt in that scenario. And because of that, I went out and started to troubleshoot and diagnose exactly what the problem was. I discovered that a skid was down, and as part of that skid, we do have a low voltage side and a high voltage side of the transformer. I heard the transformer making a very strange noise, and it was going whoop, 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 whoop. And I'm like, okay, that's odd. And so I called the supervisor for backup. There was nobody else on the site except for myself. And so I went over and started to poke around a little bit, try to figure out what was going on. My supervisor told me to test a small transformer, and that is what I did. Standard multimeter was used at that time. I was decked out in full PPE, we're talking 40 cal, with leather gloves, and I can't remember what the class of gloves were at that time, for rubber gloves. And so I went inside the skid, I tested the small transformer, and at that time, all the readings appeared to be normal. I then went outside to the skid itself, and upon my instruction from my supervisor, he stated that I needed to test the large transformer. Unfortunately, his large transformer and my large transformer were two totally different things. And so I went outside, I opened up the doors. Again, I was decked out in full PPE, complete with helmet and face shield. Went inside a transformer. The noise, of course, was still getting very loud. And I proceeded to test two legs of this transformer. Understand that I was not properly trained at that point in time in regards to that, and I ended up testing 14,000 volts AC between two legs. At that moment, and you'll have to bear with me because it is a little difficult to look back at, but at that moment, I experienced an earth blast. And this blast, I can only say, was about the intensity of the sun at very, very close range. And all of a sudden, well, basically, I remember the blast. I remember the explosion. I remember both of my ears starting to ring. And next thing you know, I wake up on the ground. So basically what had happened in that situation was I tested two legs of 14,000 volts, and it blew me backwards. And at that time, I do not remember flying through the air, but I do remember not hitting the ground, but I remember waking up with both of my ears just basically being completely deaf and feeling like my right arm was on fire. I looked down at my right arm and I saw basically a first-degree burn that went from my mid-arm from about this area up to my elbow, about first-degree burn. Shook myself off a little bit, got on the phone immediately, gave a call to CMR. I informed them that I had an arc blast event and that I was going to isolate the plant completely so that it would not happen to anyone else. That is exactly what I did. After the explosion, after all this had happened, I then went around and I took the entire site offline. I'm like, okay, I knew I had to do something. I knew I couldn't walk away. And so I then called my supervisor. I informed him that I had had an arc blast event. So what did I do? Well, I jumped in my truck after completely isolating the plant, and I drove a solid hour back home to where I live. The scary thing about that is that the majority of the trip I do not remember. I was actually in shock. And when I got back home, I didn't think much of it. I shook my head, had a couple of beers. I know you have a hard time believing that. But went to bed that night. Next morning, I stayed home and I did paperwork, in regards to the incident, things like that. And everything still seemed to be fine. I'm like, okay, still have ringing in my ears, no big deal. I'm a tough guy, whatever. And in all reality, the ringing in my ears were permanent. I went to the doctor. Well, I took a shower that night and looked down at my foot. And I realized that I had a blister on the top of my left foot. Up to that point, I did not realize that I'd actually received a shock. However, I did. 14,000 volts entered into my right arm, just up, down from my elbow, about 3 inches. Electricity had actually entered my arm, went up my arm, through my chest cavity, down my left leg, and out the top of my left foot. At that time, I realized that I had actually received shock. Up to that point, I had no idea. And so when I discovered that, I'm like, I remember in electrical theory that if you are shocked, there's an entrance and there's an exit. I found both. I went into the hospital. I saw neurologists. I saw cardiologists. I saw, hearing specialists. I saw everybody, and they're just going, you shouldn't be here. Terry has seen pictures of the gloves that I was wearing today. I do have permanent hearing loss. As a matter of fact, before we started this up today, I needed to turn up my hearing aids a little bit so I could actually hear what was going on. But I do have 85% hearing loss. And it's not a joke. It's not a game. Without this little baby right here, I know this is having fun. I would not be able to do it. I have, in the process of the blast, I tore the meniscus in my left knee. That surgery has since been completed. I have nerve damage in my right arm, and that surgery was now completed on Monday. And so I'm on the road to recovery. It is not an easy road, but it is mine. And some people say, well, gee, we're sure happy still here with us. And, that's all good. However, there are times when I wonder, number one, why am I still here? Number two, when I'm trying to go to sleep at night with permanent hearing loss caused by a massive explosion, you get a sound in your ears that is the equivalent of a screaming cicada beetle. When you lose your hearing, it does not go silent. you will always have that scream going through your head for the rest of your life. It never goes away. The nightmares continue. The PTSD does exist. I'm learning how to cope with it more and more each and every day. I do know for a fact that there were arc flash labels on the transformer. However, I also know that the arc flash labels that were in place were incorrect. The arc boundaries were off. I was actually thrown away from the transformer approximately 15 feet. I was blasted, and when I was blasted, I was thrown through the air. And basically, a number of doctors said that and there's their quote, went ragdoll. In other words, I had no control over my body in any way, shape, or form. In the process, with the actual explosion itself, the force was so strong that when it blew me backwards, I actually spun in midair and hit my left knee on the containment unit itself. And they believe that that is what happened when it blew out the meniscus in my left. I actually, my hard hat and my face shield and everything, when I regained my senses and I was laying on the ground, believe it or not, and I still can't figure this out, but my hard hat and my face shield were still on. And so, and my my glove was smoking. I know you find that hard to believe, but I took my glove off because I was basically burning my hand. But without the proper PPE, there's no way I would have been here. You bet. From this site to my home was exactly 1 hour. And I do remember after I isolated the entire plant, and I know I was in shock when I was doing it, but when I isolated the plant, once that was done, I jumped in my truck, I turned on the air conditioning full blast, and basically held my arm up over the air conditioning duct in order to keep my arm cool while I was driving. And so I drove 1 hour. I remember very, very, very little about that drive. There was one point when I did give my wife a call, and I let her know that I was on my way home and that I had had an accident and that I would see her soon. It is my right arm right here. I do have, I don't know how well you can see, but this is the surgical. Yeah, you probably can't see it. That's a surgical scar that I had for some of the repair work. And I have another one. If it would have been left arm to right foot, there stands to be an extremely high probability that electricity would have gone straight to my heart and killed me immediately. But because it was my right arm and it went through my left foot, for some reason that current flow decided to miss my heart and all my vital organs completely.
I am Cherry Pasa, and I approve this message.